Hi, this is Ben at Church Universal Triumphant, and I'm just going to be answering a couple of questions today. Periodically, when I go through the not the lessons, as in the formal online lessons that might be offered to people who pay, but the teaching as I receive it through the dispensation, which is external to the KOF. I am a keeper of the flame according to Mother, but I do not take KOF lessons. And I suppose, to some extent, it is appropriate to see a bifurcation in the church. Not that the church becomes two different entities, but that the church contains more than one kind of chela. I do believe that. And I think that, a lot of people present that they are KOF, and that's fine, and it is fine and appropriate to study in a formal environment such as Summit University, but it's also important that people in holy orders, people who have been called into the holy orders that have been established through the masters by Mark and Elizabeth, that those people are understood to be a full part of the church and not just on the sidelines, because as with the keepers, they bear significant parts of the mantle. So when I talk about lessons as they're delivered to me directly through the dispensation. Within the past, I think, several months, it's become apparent to me that there's been an acceleration of learning transmitted by Mother and the Masters to holy orders, to me as a Chela in holy orders, and I am acutely aware of that acceleration. Although feel certainly that I've been in communication with Mother for as long as I've known about her as well. So I just wanted to point that out, because I've said that before in communications with the church, or have attempted to articulate that. It's not just communicants in KOF at the church, elders and people at Summit University. There's an entire area within the church called holy orders, and not everybody knows about holy orders, and I think that's probably for a reason. I think it's because some people are called to be in holy orders and not to be typical keepers. But when you go online, and I'm not saying that everybody at the ranch has this mindset, periodically one gets the impression that there's a form of I don't know, there's an unnecessary distinction between those who live at the ranch and those who are out in the field. It can be frustrating for those of us who want to be at the ranch, certainly. But we're all part of the same church. We're all light bearers under the tutelage of Elizabeth Clare Prophet, so it's important not to lose track of that. The question I had the other day, well, 144,000, right. The elect 144,000. I want to articulate for everyone that Mother says that is archetypal. So it is figurative. It's a figurative number. We don't put out there into the world that the 144,000 that came with Sanat Kumara is limited to 144,000 souls. It is figurative. Those are the words of Elizabeth Clare Prophet. Figurative. So, some people, other religions I know, believe that it is 144,000, literally. It's 144,000 people, period, that are quote-unquote saved. That is not among our beliefs, although we do refer to the 144,000 as the elect who came with Sanat Kumara. But it is a figurative number. Terma text, that's correct. I can get online right now probably and look up some more information for us. That's the bridge or the arc between Tibetan Buddhism and Church Universal and Triumphant right now. As I'm uncovering that information about Padmasambhava and the two different kinds of Buddhism, and I'm going to get on right now and give you some more information about that. I can hear you, Anne. Okay. Yeah, there's not a problem at all. I'll just invoke El Moria for the moment. Okay, let's see here. And I will mention that list that was released of the Ascended Masters. Summit released a list of Ascended Masters and said it was for our Christmas tree. And it's a list of masters that are officially recognized by Summit. I went through. It's a really great list, and someone did a very good job in curating it. And I want to point out a couple things. It contains all of the archangels and all of the archaea. It contains all of the Elohim. And it also contains the Chohans, obviously. And then there are some other saints in there, that some of which you will recognize from Christian mysticism, some of which you will recognize from Hinduism, and so on. It also contains all 5 of the Dhyani Buddhas. So that jumped out at me as well. So it's Dhyani Buddhas, Elohim, Archangels and Archaea, and then some more thrown in. So review that list if you're working a lot with the Ascended Master information. And I have a copy of that I'll gladly pass along. That's actually me in another recording. I have to build a computer, put the keys on the keyboard, and so forth. Okay. Buddhist studies. So let's see if I can come up with. So I look.
Theravada.
And the other is Mahayana. Okay.
Mahayana.
Really briefly, Merriam-Webster is describing Mahayana as a liberal and theistic branch. And by theistic, I'll tell you that I know right away that they refer to Tibetan Buddhism, which has elements of it contains certain, I suppose, pagan elements, although they're referring to it as theistic, which I suppose is more accurate of a descriptor. A liberal and theistic branch of Buddhism comprising sects chiefly in China and Japan, recognizing a large body of scripture in addition to the Pali Canon, and teaching social concern and universal salvation. Compare Theravada. Okay? So that's Tibetan Buddhism, and Theravada, also known as the Teachings of the Elders, it hails from Southern Asia, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Laos, Burma, Thailand, all of which have accepted the principles of the Theravada school, and any differences there might be between the various schools is restricted to minor matters. It states, there never arose any serious differences on the fundamentals of Buddhism. Refer to buddhanet.net. That's World Wide Web .buddhanet.net. E-learning. You'll find it if you do a search for it. And it's under the page, The Buddhist Schools. And there's a map that will show Theravada versus Mahayana Buddhism. This particular page is stating that the Theravadins may be called the most orthodox school of Buddhism. This school admits the human characteristics of the Buddha and is characterized by a psychological understanding of human nature. and emphasizes a meditative approach to the transformation of consciousness. The teaching of the Buddha, according to this school, and I will cross-check this, is very plain. He asks us to abstain, quote-unquote, well, open quote, abstain from all kinds of evil, to accumulate all that is good, and to purify our mind, close quote. These can be accomplished by the 3 trainings, which are the development of ethical conduct, secondly, meditation, and lastly, insight wisdom, hyphenated, insight wisdom. So, development of ethical conduct, meditation, and insight wisdom. The philosophy of this school is straightforward. All worldly phenomena are subject to 3 characteristics. They are impermanent and transient, unsatisfactory in that there is nothing in them which can be called one's own, nothing substantial, nothing permanent. Again, this is Orthodox Buddhism, so feel free to disagree or to take exception to certain of what is being presented here. Because it's on paper and because it's arising as an apparent part of the true Theravada does not mean that it is the true Theravada. In fact, it's like expecting Roman Catholicism as it appears on paper to represent the truest elements of Christianity. It might be getting towards that, or it might be opening up a path to your awakening into Christianity, and it might have moments of absolute revelatory brilliance, but is not necessarily encompassing the entirety of the truth at all times. When people talk to me about meditation, part of the problem that I have with meditation is that meditation is important. It's important to do it the right way, however, and for instance, not everybody supports transcendental meditation. Transcendental meditation is where the meditator attempts to clear one's mind of all things. And some people who practice meditation feel that that's not appropriate. You should be focusing on a mandala, or you should be focusing on a chakral color or a chakral ray. So TM, and I've had problems with TM before because it can open you up to the fallen forces, because your mind has nothing to attach itself to. If you're not clear of fallen angel energy, TM can leave you vulnerable to the influence of the fallen ones. So when people say meditate, be sure that you understand what you're doing and be sure that you're doing it the right way. Or, that's not to mean that you should feel shackled and that you should not impart into certain studies with partial information, but don't always take things at face value. So Theravada, and again, but really what they're trying to do in talking about worldly phenomena is they're trying to say that it is all Maya, I suppose, and that is true. Material matter is Maya to an extent, but I know the Church CUT recently has been associated with a statement claiming that, well, the world does have substance. So we will definitely be talking more about that. It is Maya, yes, but it also does have substance. Yes, that is true as well. And it is also the Steiner teaching. It's Luciferic and Ahrimanic energy attempting to counterbalance each other. And periodically, I think that the universe is in more of a Luciferic state, meaning in an etheric state, according to Steiner, than it is in concretion. But Theravada is stating that basically the transient nature of all things in the material realm. Mental formatives, that's an interesting term to use. They are further described. All compounded things are made up of 2 elements, the non-material part and the material part. That's a bit like Luciferic and Ahrimanic. They are further described as consisting of nothing but 5 constituent groups, namely the material quality and the 4 non-material qualities: sensations, perception, mental formatives, and lastly, consciousness. When an individual thus understands the true nature of things, she or he finds nothing substantial in the world. Now, one I think teaching from Buddhism, and one form of awareness that you should bring into your studies of Buddhism is that periodically you might encounter a world religion for the first time and not understand that you're actually at a more advanced level than the level to which they're referring. When they talk about ego loss, that's one of the stumbling blocks that I've encountered in the past with Buddhism, is that they refer to how important it is to lose your ego, how important it is not to just be, I suppose, egocentric, or not to let one's ego monopolize the entirety of one's consciousness. Well, that is an important point, but that's a point that most people at CUT, I think by the time you reach CUT, you've already achieved that level. You already understand that ego only presents a component of the entirety of consciousness, or it only refers to one stage in development. And yes, there is ego, and it must be managed, but it is also a gift and a tool. The message from Kuthumi within recent months has been, ego is important, and it is important to develop ego. People have used the concepts of ego, libido, id, and so forth to the world's disadvantage. You have people misinterpreting the early psychologists to the detriment of humanity, trying to say, well, I can locate the sane among you from the insane, and the insane among you are going to be relegated to these dangerous institutions where 100,000 people are going to commit suicide annually. That's a huge problem. It's fascism and so forth, and anybody who knows me understands that I'm pursuing lawsuits against locked ward mental hospitals at the moment. But there still exists such a thing as psychology, and we can look at it responsibly. But it is very important to distinguish between the psychology of the therapist's couch that could potentially lead to locked ward mental hospital institutionalization, or whatever the chances that if you go to a therapist that you're going to be committed to a mental hospital. As long as that person claims to have the authority to make a decision about whether or not you belong in a place that is not of God, and that could result in your soul death, then there's a problem. There's a problem with a system that supports that sort of quote-unquote treatment. And that's why we need to get away from allopathic psychiatry and start working with shamans and religious healers. So in Buddhism, one of the stumbling blocks for me, at least when I entered Buddhism, it's a great path. Some people call it a religion, some people don't. Many Buddhists do not even consider themselves to be religious. But ego, like I understand that about ego already. So when I encounter it, the first thing is, lose your ego. Well, that is true. You do have to evolve to a certain level in order to participate fully. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. People still do need to benefit from ego, and ego still is a factor. And ego, the management of ego by outer forces needs to be monitored, because we don't want to be subjugated. But so ego, and then there's the idea that meditation is valuable. I just, in my own experience, and it could be that I'm in a place possible that people, I suppose, who are more free than I are able. That does not mean that they're more advanced from the standpoint of attainment. It just means that they're more free and perhaps less less, I suppose, affected by outer forces, the dark ones. It might be that TM is easier for people who are very free to pursue, it would be very difficult for me to pursue transcendental meditation. When I meditate, it has to involve a mandala or a chakra color, or mantras. So that's my caution to people who say, I'm going to sit down and just clear my mind of everything. Well, don't clear your mind of absolutely everything if some of your attachments are actually preventing dark energy from entering your consciousness. And so they talk about the middle path. When an individual thus understands the true nature of things, she or he finds nothing substantial in the world. Okay, true and not true. We could write an entire book on that. Through this understanding, there is neither indulgence in the pleasures of senses or self-mortification. Following the middle path, the practitioner lives according to the Noble Eightfold Path, which consists of right view, right resolve, right speech, right actions, right occupation or livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. She or he realizes that all worldly suffering is caused by craving, and that it is possible to bring suffering to an end by following the Noble Eightfold Path. So these are spiritual techniques. And as far as the worldview is concerned, I think that one can distill very valuable tools from what they're presenting here. For instance, as opposed to it being there's neither indulgence in the pleasures of senses or self-mortification. I mean, presumably life is to be enjoyed, and the opening of the heart chakra is pleasurable. So I'm not sure that, I think when I think of Buddhism, I think of it as being a tool. I think of it, and maybe that's why a lot of Buddhists don't necessarily say that it's a religion, because it might be one thing to, in the moment, have to manage your prana, and have to, or the prana, and have to meditate in a certain fashion, in a way that might be a form of self-mortification, or might be a form of non-indulgence in the pleasure of the senses in the moment. It might help you organize your day or your work so that you are pursuing right occupation, as an instance, and not falling into, a bottle of booze at 12 in the afternoon because you want the pleasure of the senses. That sort of thing. That does make sense to me, but it makes sense to me on a practical level. The worldview that everything is transient, I'm not sure that, for me personally on my path, I don't know that would be enough. I think that I need to cling to something beyond just the transient nature of existence now, in the moment, but also in the broader view as well. That's just a personal choice, and Buddhists will probably say that's perfectly fine, because I think that part of the teaching of Buddhism, and I'm not denigrating Buddhism, I'm saying these are incredible tools, and the awareness is really amazing as well, and to stop and think about the Eightfold Path. Is this right resolve? Am I resolving in the right direction? Are my actions appropriate? Am I saying the right things? All of that is invaluable information, and I think from day to day any one of us can lose track of that if we don't use the appropriate tools to remind ourselves. But in the grander scheme of things, who's to say? Some Buddhists saying that there's no God. Well, I think that if you need to believe in God in order to make it from day one to day two, that's your prerogative. And there are other reasons to adhere to belief beyond the transient nature of existence. And I think that some Buddhists would say, no, they have it actually wrong here. What you're reading when they're describing the teachings of the elders, as it appears in print before me now, it's like I consider myself to have followed certain parts of Roman Catholicism, and when I read one of the bishops saying X, Y, and Z, or when I read one theory at one location, I can feel free to disagree with it. So, and I think that it would be pointless to be Buddhist if you're not able to formulate your own opinion, and if you're not able to adhere to your own path. It would contradict the entirety of Buddhism. So I want to make that additional clarification. So,
Arhat. Arhat. Arhat.
Arhat. Okay. That's when you reach the stage of enlightenment. Arhat. Arhat. And Theravada. Mahayana means the great vehicle. Is more of an umbrella body for a great variety of schools, from the Tantra school, which is the secret teaching of yoga, well represented in Tibet and Nepal, to the Pure Land sect, okay? Pure Land, capital P, capital L, sect, whose essential teaching is that salvation can be attained only through absolute trust in the saving power of Amitabha, longing to be reborn in his paradise through his grace, which are found in China, Korea, and Japan. Chan and Zen Buddhism of China and Japan are meditation schools. Amitabha is one of the Dhyani Buddhas. According to these schools, to look inward and not to look outwards is the only way to achieve enlightenment, which, to the human mind, is ultimately the same as Buddhahood. In this system, the emphasis is upon intuition, in quotes, its peculiarity being that it has no words in which to express itself at all, so it does this in symbols and images. In the course of time, the system developed its philosophy of intuition to such a degree that it remains unique to this day. Okay, it is generally accepted that what we know today as the Mahayana arose from the Mahasanghikas sect, who were the earliest seceders and the forerunners of the Mahayana. They took up the cause of their new sect with zeal and enthusiasm, and in a few decades grew remarkably in power and popularity. They adapted the existing monastic rules and thus revolutionized the Buddhist order of monks. Moreover, they made alterations in the arrangements and interpretation of the sutra, discourses, and the Vinaya, rules, the texts of both of those, the sutra and the Vinaya texts. Sutra means discourses, Vinaya means rules, and they rejected certain portions of the canon which had been accepted in the first council. According to it, the Buddhas are Lokotara, supra-mundane, not super-mundane, supra-mundane, above the mundane, and are connected only externally with the worldly life. This conception of the Buddha contributed much to the growth of the Mahayana philosophy. Okay, and this gets into theory of reality and unreality, as I was mentioning before. Mahayana Buddhism is divided into two systems of thought. The Madhyamikas were so called on account of the emphasis they laid on the middle view. Here, the middle path stands for the non-acceptance of the two views concerning existence and non-existence, eternity and non-eternity, self and non-self. In short, it advocates neither the theory of reality nor that of the unreality of the world, but merely of relativity. That's interesting for CUT people as well. It is, however, to be noted that the middle path propounded at Samath by the Buddha had an ethical meaning, while that of the Madhyamikas is a metaphysical concept. I'm not sure what the difference is there. The Yogacara school is another important branch of the Mahayana. It was so called because it emphasized the practice of yoga or meditation as the most effective method for the attainment of the highest truth, Bodhi. All the 10 stages of spiritual progress of bodhisattvahood have to be passed through before bodhi can be attained. The ideal of the Mahayana school, therefore, is that of the bodhisattva, a person who delays his or her own enlightenment in order to compassionately assist all other beings and ultimately attains to the highest bodhi. Right, and that's the Christ path as well. And that's part of the missing link between mystical Christianity and Buddhism. And Buddhists are perfectly aware of it, as CUT people are aware. It's that we're just using two different models. But one thing to understand, when they discuss bodhisattvas, right, the bodhisattva is really on the Via Dolorosa with Christ. The bodhisattva has said, not my redemption, not my salvation, not my ascension until all the other souls have been released. That's the correct path for the yogi and the spiritual seeker. But what we have said, I know at CUT, we talk about, it's not Paramahansa Yogananda. It's one of the... We have a list of who's ascended and who's not ascended. And we refer to the non-ascended masters of the Himalayas. And some of those masters to whom we refer as non-ascended, they really are ascended. It's that they're still in embodiment. They're in duality. And, they are bodhisattvas, but, Amoria is a bodhisattva. Kuthumi is a bodhisattva as well. So as long as you're on that path, you might not have achieved your liberation, and you might not have achieved the victory component of the ascension, which doesn't necessarily involve a loss of the body. But you are walking the path of Christhood in the same fashion that Kuthumi walked it, in the same way that all the ascended masters walked that path. And so when we refer to someone as having remained behind, as I believe it was either Babaji or Paramahansa Yogananda, Babaji is on the list of ascended masters, and I don't think PY is, but PY really is ascended because he is a bodhisattva. We all stay behind, including the masters. We've all stayed behind until the final ultimate ascension. So if you're a bodhisattva, there's really only one kind of bodhisattva, although we refer to ascended and unascended masters. If you're at a certain level of attainment, you're as ascended as you can possibly be. It's that the victory ascension doesn't come until you've made your final transition into moksha, into release from samsara. But you can be at a higher level of attainment and not have achieved release from samsara. I think that's my message for the time being. Okay, and I refer you now to Vajrayana.org, and that's Tibetan Buddhism, founded by Lama Rinpoche. It was created by Lama Rinpoche to establish the Buddha Dharma in the West. Okay, and their main retreat center is Pema Osa Ling, Lotus Land of Clear Light, located in Santa Cruz, California. Okay, there's a Dharma Treasures bookstore. This looks like a lot of good information. Heart Teachings by Lama Rinpoche, so check it out. And ways to join. But my question is, Mahayana versus Vajrayana, and if Vajrayana is considered, I believe Vajrayana is a branch of Mahayana. There's Nichiren Buddhism as well, which is Japanese. Okay, and that was founded in the 13th century. Theravadan was the first school to emerge after the historical Buddha's death, Shakyamuni. This school is comprised of monks and nuns, is very strict. They have 10 precepts instead of the 5 the rest of us follow, according to this one adherent. And I have another reference here that refers to Vajrayana as the third branch of Buddhism. So Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. Pure Land Buddhism is a subsect of Mahayana Buddhism practiced in both China and Japan. Okay, this refers to conflicts between Buddhism and Taoism, although it also states that Taoism is an integral part of Buddhism and vice versa. Many of the writings of early Chinese Buddhists contain a good deal of Taoist terminology and phrasings. However, unlike traditional Buddhism, in which devout followers were encouraged to leave their families for a life of monasticism, most Buddhist believers in China continued to devote themselves to their families. Very, very few left their ordinary lives to become monks or pursue asceticism, and for a time Buddhism coexisted rather peacefully with Confucianism, Taoism, and the Chinese culture. However, this all began to change with the fall of the Han Dynasty around the year 2020. With the fall of this once powerful and centralizing dynasty, China slid into political turmoil and so forth. So, Buddhism gains power. Fortunately for the Buddhists, this special treatment of sorts lasted well, and I left out a paragraph here, but lasted well into the Tang Dynasty. Okay, again, back to BuddhaNet. So this is a good source, I believe. This looks very well researched. The other source to which I referred in previous recordings was BibleNet.org, which contains the program Lumina, just like the Elohim. So use that as well. There are plenty of free resources on the internet for CUT people and for people who seek to craft their own lessons. So take advantage of those, and also take advantage of, if you can spare, $3 or $4 a month, you'd be surprised at how much you can download from the Ascended Master Library now. And additionally, someone just came out, and I think it was The Ranch, came out with a great codification or adaptation of Wikipedia that contains only Ascended Masters information. So there's this whole area now, and you can find a link to it on my Holy Orders site, which is under the name Benjamin Turner, just my first name and my last name. Ben Turner is my personal account. Benjamin Turner is my Holy Orders account. And if you look on there, you will find a link to that incredible resource, and it's free. So definitely take a look at it. Right. So here at BuddhaNet.net, we will find 3 columns. One says topic, one says Theravada Buddhism, and the other says Mahayana Buddhism. Okay, and here's one of the distinctions between when they refer to bodhisattvas, and I had heard this as well. Again, my presentation to you is that they talk about a bodhisattva eventually becomes a Buddha, and yet other Buddhists believe that bodhisattvas and Buddhas are really the same. To be a Buddha, you really are a bodhisattva. But in Theravada Buddhism, only Maitreya Bodhisattva is accepted. And Mahayana Buddhism lists 4 entities. I see what they're saying here, that are bodhisattvas besides Maitreya. Well, Maitreya is the Buddha who is coming into being. And I had read someone attempt to state that Maitreya was the Lord of the world. This isn't correct. Maitreya is not the Lord of the world. Gautama Buddha is the Lord of the world. Maitreya might be the Lord of the world for some people who feel that it has changed, but I do not support that change in hierarchy. Maitreya is the Buddha who is coming into being. That's the core of what you need to know with regard to Maitreya. He is not Gautama Buddha, who is in the here and now, but rather the Buddha who is either returning or coming into being, coming into reality, this dimension, etc. So when there was a flap for a while, probably last November for a while, all these people were on the internet talking about Maitreya, the the reappearance of Maitreya. When will it happen? When will we witness the wonders of Maitreya? We know he's here. We know he's coming. Or is he among us now? Well, if he's among us now, he's Buddha. But Maitreya will always just be. Maitreya is the coming into being of Buddha. So he's always coming into being, that it's an important concept, and you don't want to lose track of Maitreya. But Maitreya is the Buddha when the Buddha is coming into being. So as far as, I don't really know at this juncture when they talk about Maitreya Bodhisattvas accepted in Theravada Buddhism, whereas Mahayana Buddhism is talking about Samantabhadra and some other bodhisattvas besides Maitreya. I'm not really referring to that at this juncture, because I'm not sure what how their presentation goes. Pacceka Buddha. And I don't understand some of the distinction, because in Theravada Buddhism, objective of training, they're saying Arahant training is the objective, whereas Mahayana Buddhism is Buddhahood via the Bodhisattva path, and I don't see how those two differ, because you're trying to achieve enlightenment, or really you're trying to achieve moksha in each of those scenarios. So I'll have to look at that again. Yeah, and that Merriam-Webster, it looks like a really good source for if you need to plug in words and have them pronounced for you. It has all these all this Buddhist terminology. I'm not sure. Yeah, I guess.
Arhat, 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 Arhat.
Concept of bodhicitta. Theravada Buddhism, main emphasis is self-liberation. There is total reliance on oneself to eradicate all defilements. Mahayana, besides self-liberation, it is important for Mahayana followers to help other sentient beings. Trikaya concept, very limited in Theravada, very limited emphasis on the three bodies of a Buddha. References are mainly on Nirmanakaya and Dharmakaya. Mahayana Buddhism, very well mentioned in Mahayana Buddhism. Sambhogakaya, or reward enjoyment body, completes the Trikaya concept. Very funny. Let's see here. Okay. One meal a day practice is the norm among Theravada sanghas. In Mahayana, it is a highly respected practice, but it is left to the disposition of each individual in the various sanghas. Vegetarianism aspect is not necessary in Theravada. In places like Thailand, where daily morning rounds are still practiced, it is very difficult to insist on the type of food to be donated. It's very well observed in all Mahayana schools except the Tibetans due to the geographical circumstances. However, this aspect is not compulsory. Right, I've heard Mother make calls for protection in advance of certain kinds of invocation. And I would say, just if you feel that you need that extra protection during a decree or in the aftermath of a decree, then bring that will and bring that into your focus at the beginning of the interaction with Mother, and use that as a focus, even if she's not proclaiming that it's a call for protection. Or you can start your call for protection in advance of the decree. internally. One thing, I was told the other day, I mean, you never want to just, it would be poor meditative practice and poor prayer practice to just up and depart all of a sudden from ending a decree sermon, rather a decree session. You will feel the benefits of the decree, and you should stay in the meditative state succeeding the decree until you're told that you have the release to re-engage ordinary activity. Right view, which is one of the paths on the Eightfold Path, I'll give you the words from a different site, buddhaheads.com, and it's buddha-heads.com. The first step of the Noble Eightfold Path is the right view, a sensible approach that leads or guides along the longevity of the path. To walk through the path, we, the humans, must have the idea where we are traveling so that we would not wander aimlessly and eventually end up getting lost. Even when a compass points us towards our destination, taking the most direct course may not be possible every time if it involves plunging over the steepest cliffs, walking into the dense and the most overgrown parts of the forest. By having the knowledge of what to pay attention to, we can read the forest and later discover the aspects that show the best way forward. The right view perspective in the Buddhist path is more of a practice of keeping a keen eye on our relationship to whatever we are experiencing in our lives. Moreover, this particular practice is also described as using the perspective of the Four Noble Truths. Which are, there is suffering or dukkha, there is cause or origin of suffering or dukkha, there is end of suffering or dukkha, there is path out of suffering or dukkha.
Dukkha.
That's how you pronounce it in English, dukkha.
Dukkha.
So again, Four Noble Truths. There is suffering. There is cause or origin of suffering. So in other words, suffering doesn't arise out of a vacuum. As I've stated elsewhere, it can be thrust upon you by exteriorities. There is an end of suffering, and there is a path out of suffering. So there is suffering. The suffering will end. There is a cause for that suffering, and there is a path out of the suffering. Those are the Four Noble Truths are a subset of right view. You have to adhere to the Four Noble Truths in order to properly maintain right view, which is on the Eightfold Buddha path. This teaching, it is our responsibility to analyze the reason of sufferings. The ignorance about reality of life, attachment to pleasurable experiences, and aversion are the main reasons. We constantly have a fear of getting that which we don't desire, or not getting that which we desire. The fourth noble truth says that there are interconnected aspects when developed together that will lead us towards the path of ending dukkha, and that is dhyana. The path term is usually described to take us to the Noble Eightfold Path, which are, as we discussed, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Buddha says that when we have learned these Four Noble Truths with open mind, then we will be able to handle all the suffering with an ease. Eventually it will bring a smile onto our faces like that in laughing Buddha statues. So there you have it. Okay. Dukkha, D-U-K-K-H-A. Okay, going a little deeper. Having overcome all traces of selfishness and desire, Siddhartha Gautama entered a deep meditative state in order to realize the ultimate reality, not merely for his own life benefit, but for the sake of all beings. Throughout the night, he sat recalling his previous existences until at dawn he achieved perfect enlightenment. He had become Buddha, an awakened one. Again, this is really the Christ path. This is the true awakening of Jesus. We're told in Orthodox groups often that God ordained Jesus to die on the cross. Jesus might have questioned that at certain points. Well, we know that he did want the cup to pass and so forth, but that ultimately he was just sort of part of a strategy that is supposed to remain mysterious to most Christian adherents, unfortunately. It's truly more the path that Siddhartha Gautama walked when he said that not only for his own life benefit, for the sake of all beings. It's important to understand that Jesus underwent the same transformation. For several weeks, the Buddha remained in meditation beneath his tree. During this time, he was visited by the gods Indra and Brahma, who begged him to share his experience with others for the benefit of those who would understand teachings. The Mahabodhi temple at Bodh Gaya marks the site of the Buddha's enlightenment and is an important place of pilgrimage for the Buddhist faithful. Although the present building dates from the 12th century AD and has been restored many times, the original temple is said to have been founded by Ashoka in the 3rd century BC. A descendant of the original tree under which Shakyamuni meditated still grows in the grounds and is known as the Bodhi tree. And there are pieces of the Bodhi tree that were transplanted to, and saplings transplanted to Sri Lanka, and you can visit the Bodhi tree, the Bodhi tree's offspring, at a holy site in Sri Lanka as well. And I'd love to go. I have a friend there who would love to set up a religious pilgrimage for us at CUT. It's a question of raising the funds to get me to go along. So if people have an interest in going and are willing to pay just a little bit of a premium to pay for my trip, if we have 15 people that go together, it would not be that much of an expense, of an additional expense to go. And the entire, really it would be a fee that one would pay otherwise for the travel agency to organize it and to take care of administrative costs and that sort of thing. So now they're speaking in terms of plural guanyins, probably because they're talking about statuary at this juncture. And again, we're referring to Guanyin as a bodhisattva, also an ascended master. She's often compared with Virgin Mary or Mother Mary. In China, Guanyin is sometimes shown in a white flowing robe and usually wears necklaces of Indian or Chinese royalty. In her left hand is a jar containing pure water, and the right holds a willow branch. The crown usually depicts the image of Amitabha Buddha, Guanyin's spiritual teacher before she became a bodhisattva. In Chinese art, Guanyin is often depicted either alone, standing atop a dragon, accompanied by a white parrot, flanked by 2 children, or flanked by 2 warriors. The 2 children are her acolytes who came to her when she was meditating at Mount Putuo. The girl is called Long Nu and the boy Sudana. Guanyin is immensely popular among Chinese Buddhists and can be seen in many Buddhist temples and monasteries. And at this Burmese-art.com site, you can link to statues of Guanyin. And I believe even order a Guanyin. They're quite lovely. They're porcelain. And I am requesting information about bulk orders on behalf of the Summit Lighthouse. Antique wooden Mandalay Buddha. Yeah, these are pretty great. This is a skinny Buddha. Using the Bhumi Sparsha Mudra. Which is the left hand open in the lap, in the lotus position. Padmasambhava means lotus born, and Padmasambhava is also known as Guru Rinpoche, an 8th century Indian Buddhist. He made his own statue, which can still be found in Narsing Gompa, and the full story is at muktinath.org, and features information about the Namdroling Monastery. Padmasambhava is inseparable from the primordial Buddha Samantabhadra, the all-pervading lord of the three jewels of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Those are the three jewels of Buddhism. And master of the three roots of Lama, Yidam, and Dakini, and is the essence of Buddha Amitabha. Quoting from the site, in order to propagate and spread the teachings of the Dharma in general, and particularly the secret mantra and Dzogchen teachings, that's Dzogchen teachings, he appears to every being of the 3,000 billion world systems in a form to benefit them according to their personal karmic vision. In this way, Guru Padmasambhava has countless unimaginable biographies, one biography for each being. Mother, in the recordings, the video recordings produced by the Summit Lighthouse, has said that Germain has been known in at least one lifetime by everyone at the Summit Lighthouse. We've all known Saint Germain. This is similar. The historical figure, Guru Padmasambhava's life story as known to the common disciples, is as follows. When the time for Guru Rinpoche to liberate the beings of this world approached, on the 10th day of the 6th month of the monkey year, he appeared miraculously in the blossom of a lotus in the lake called Ocean of Milk in southwest Odiyana, which is also known as Lake Danakosha, located on the Afghanistan-Pakistan frontier. However, there are different interpretations regarding his birth. Some Indian historians affirm that he was born to a minister or a king of Odiyana, and some claim that he appeared instantaneously on the summit of Mount Malaya in Sri Lanka. But Guru Padmasambhava's treasured teachings confirm the version which states that he was born spontaneously from a lotus. The source is the most renowned, and thus the following history is provided accordingly. The great river Sindhu, one of the four great rivers that springs from the four directions of Kailash mountain, flows towards the western land of Odiyana and finally empties into the Arabian Sea. When the river reaches Odiyana, it forms a lake filled with lotuses. As the lotus roots produce a sweet milky juice, it is called Ocean of Milk. prior to Guru Padmasambhava's birth, in the center of the lake, a large, fully mature, beautiful red lotus grew, and from the heart of Buddha Amitabha in space, a red syllable, Hri, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, I think it's Hri, H-R-I, fell about 8 cubits above the cholera of the lotus. The syllable dissolved into light, and instantly, without depending on the causes and conditions of father and mother, there arose an 8-year-old child perfectly adorned with the characteristic major and minor marks. Holding a vajra and a lotus in his hands, he immediately began giving teachings to the gods and dakinis of the area. At that time, the ruler of the land of Odayana, the second king Indrabodhi, was residing in his 9-tufted palace with his queen, as well as hundreds and thousands of inner and outer ministers. Because the king did not have a son on the full moon day of the 5th summer month, he made great offerings to the triple gems and recited the Dharma Cloud Sutra. He also opened the door of his 3,000 treasuries and went on distributing alms to the poor and needy until his wealth was exhausted. He then exclaimed, "Beggars have still not ceased, but I have nothing to grant." When the remaining beggars did not receive their share, they told the king that if he did not provide their share, whatever was done in the past would be meaningless. The king heard this and inspired, I believe they mean conspired to acquire inexhaustive wealth for the beggars. No, it is inspired. The king heard this and, inspired to acquire inexhaustive wealth for the beggars, he traveled to the ocean to procure the wish-fulfilling jewel from the crown of the mystical creature Charumati, daughter of Naga. He procured the jewel without mishap and sailed back with his boat filled with the 7 varieties of jewels. While traveling to meet the king's religious minister Trignadzin found the extraordinary child on the lotus and narrated the full story of the child to the king. The king was pleased by this news and went to the child, inquired about his father, mother, and to which caste and country he belonged. The child exclaimed, "My father is the self-arisen Samantabhadra. My mother is the sphere of reality, Samantabhadri. My caste is the union of primordial wisdom and the Dharma Dhatu, and my name is the glorious Padmasambhava." And then he took princesses. He ended up marrying and took princesses and so forth. I don't mean to glean over the part where the female deities come into play. It's that there's a lot of material here. Interesting, another paragraph. In order to inspire faith towards the teachings and the disciples of the future, he then went to Bodh Gaya and many other places, displaying the act of receiving teachings from many great scholars, accomplished masters, and dakinis. By listening just once, he comprehended and accomplished the whole canon of the 3 baskets of Vinaya, Sutra, and Abhidharma, as well as the teachings of the outer and inner secret mantra, oral transmissions, and the pith instructions of the highest and innermost tantra of Adi Yoga. Even if he did not propitiate, the deities of the mandala displayed their forms, and he became a peerless erudite and accomplished master. Thus he showed the signs of perfecting the level of the fully ripened awareness holder. Thereafter was he known as the Guru Dimana Varuchi, the supreme love endowed with wisdom. He then took Princess Mandarava, daughter of Shastradhara, the king of Zahor, as his consort. Possessing the marks of a Dakini, he took her to the mountain cave of Maratika, known as Halesha, in present-day Nepal, where they performed the accomplishment rituals of longevity for 3 months and actualized the immortal Vajra body, which marks the attainment of an immortal life awareness holder. In order to tame the people of Odayana, he returned there disguised as a mendicant, but many people recognized him, and he was set to be burned alive in a sandalwood fire by a host of evil-minded ministers and people. When the fire was lit, he miraculously transformed the fire into a huge lake filled with lotuses. Sitting himself with consort over a giant lotus in the middle of the lake, the king, ministers, and people were astounded and developed great faith towards him. In addition, at the cave of Yanglashad in Nepal, he practiced the Vishuddha deity, depending on the accomplishment consort Sakya Devi of Nepal, and very soon both of them became supreme Mahamudra awareness holders. Thus were some of the achievements of Guru Padmasambhava prior to coming to Tibet. And then the next section describes how the master spreads the Dharma in the land of the snows. When Lord Buddha gave Avalokiteshvara the responsibility of taming the backwards land of Tibet, Avalokiteshvara looked at the barbaric land and shed tears of compassion. From these tears, the goddess Ganga and Gangchangma were born. One day, goddess Gangchangma stole some celestial flowers, and due to her decline in merit, when she died, she was unable to again take rebirth as a god and fell to the human realm. She took birth as the human woman Duchagma, the daughter of Saleh from the Jardzinma caste. Being born from Avalokiteshvara's tears, she naturally had great faith in the Dharma